Hello, I'm Kristy Wallace, and this is Suddenly I See, a podcast which explores the power of a positive mindset, gratitude, and love in changing your life for the better. Join me as I share the mind hacks, rituals, and choices that have helped me survive and thrive in the face of adversity to arrive at a point where suddenly I see what truly matters in this life. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 16, Throw Your Anchors and Dream Big. Interesting title. During this period with Paddy, things were actually ticking along pretty well. So he was on the immunotherapy day 101 trial drug. And despite from, some significant visual appearances in hair and skin tone, everything was actually ticking along pretty nicely. And it gave me a chance to kind of double down on a few other things as well, which I thought I would share because anchors is something I came across back in 2021 when I was studying to be a life coach. Really enjoyed learning a lot about the brain, how we operate, how we think. And I studied under a guy called Calvin Coyles, who is an amazing life coach. And we had this weekend basically of virtual learning. It was when COVID was on, so everything was virtual. And he talked about anchors. And I realized actually in listening to this that these were things I'd been using throughout our journey with Paddy, really from the moment we were in Sydney, but not realizing what they were called and that they were actually of use to our brain and to surviving challenging times as well. So I thought I'd share with you all a little bit about anchors, the ones I've used, and also maybe encourage you to try and think of some for yourself because they're a really powerful tool. So when I was studying life coaching, he introduced the idea of anchors by giving the example of the New Zealand All Black rugby team. And the idea behind an anchor is that it's something that you say, something you do, something you wear, something you smell, whatever sense you want to appeal to. And the idea is that in doing those things, it puts you in a certain state. And so he gave the example, as I said, of the New Zealand rugby team, the All Blacks. And we all know if you've watched any kind of sport, and whether you watched it or not really, you would have seen that the All Black team do the haka before every game, and most New Zealand teams do. And they did a lot of research into the All Blacks as to why were they the most successful rugby team in history. And they looked at, was it their uniform? Was it their logo? And they deduced it down to the fact that it's because they do the haka before every game. And if you know the haka, it's basically a war cry from traditional Maori times. And in doing this, what they're actually doing is preparing themselves ready for battle. That's the whole idea of the haka. But when you do that before a game, that puts you in this kind of mindset, right? That you're going out there to attack. You're going to be fearsome. You're going to be, a warrior and a fighter. And so when you do this ritual every time before the game and put yourself in that state of mind, they linked that to the success of the team. And so drawing from that is this idea of, so what can we do as an anchor to try and get ourselves in a certain state? And so maybe it could be as simple as you have some anxiety, and so you want something that you can wear, see, or do to try and bring you back to a calm state. So some examples of things I've used as anchors, particularly around anxiety as well, is I've got a cuff that I actually bought myself, and it says on it, "You've got this." And I wear it whenever usually when I'm presenting and I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed by that, or if I'm going in to have a difficult conversation with someone, I put that on as a reminder to just look down and be like, no, you're okay, you've got this. The other thing I do is I created my own anchor, so a movement, and this was something we were challenged to do during the life coaching course. And it's really hard because on the spot you think, I don't know, what action do I want to do to get in a certain state, And so I came up with a quick one on the day, but I've evolved it since then. And it's actually a practice that I do nearly every day of the week. Not every day, but nearly every day. Every time I go for a walk in the morning, I do this practice because it just grounds me and it sets me in the right intention to start the day. So the anchor that I created, I'll describe to you, and I'll try and do a little video somewhere on socials for you as well. So basically it starts with standing still and grounding into your feet. And then I take a deep breath in and bring my hands together at the top, like in a prayer position, and I bring it to my forehead. And inside I say, positive mindset, positive thoughts. And then I exhale, and then I breathe in again, big arms out together at the center and down to my lips in a prayer pose. And I say kind words. And that often is either to myself or to others, because I find quite regularly that the worst words I use are towards myself. So it's a reminder to make sure I'm actually being kind in how I speak to myself as well. And then I exhale and I breathe in, arms come up again to the center, down to my chest. And then I place my hands flat across my chest and I say the words loving heart. And I take a deep breath while they're here and I breathe out again and I feel my chest expand with the potential of love that I have in my heart. And then I breathe in again and I bring my hands right down my body to the ground where I'm touching my fingertips on the floor. And I say then, let me focus on the beauty and the fragility in nature. And while I'm there, I enjoy a beautiful hamstring stretch, which are always tight, but I look at the ground. Can I see any form of life? Is there a little ant crawling around? Is there a dead leaf to remind me that I'm actually part of something bigger? And that, we know from our experience with Paddy, life can change in a heartbeat, but there's also beauty in that as well. Life is fragile and beauty at the same time. So acknowledging that juxtaposition while I do that breath and that pose. And then I stand up again and I take another deep breath, breathe in and bring my hands back to my chest again. And this time as I take a really big inhale and I feel my chest expand, I open my arms out in like a gesture. And I always picture, that I've got this beam of light coming out of my chest. And as I open up, I say, let me share my light and love with everyone that I encounter today. And then I start to twist gently as if I'm spreading my love around, but also secretly a beautiful back stretch because I'm someone that's had a bad back. And so that always feels really great. And there's research now as well to support that twisting kind of sensation, gentle twisting, helps to reset your parasympathetic nervous system. So added benefit that I didn't realize. And so that's a little practice, like I said, I do each morning, and I start my day focusing on what are my thoughts going to be positive? How am I going to speak kindly? I'm going to act from love, because to me, these are things that are really important to who I am as a person. And I want to make sure I'm starting every day with the intention of that as number one priority. Does that mean I'm a beautiful person all day? No, I still get sweary. I still sometimes get very frustrated with my children. It's an intention and it helps. And I'm not saying it's going to fix everything, but you have a choice, as always in life, of what we want to focus on. And while I'm not perfect in everything I do, I think starting the day with that anchor is a really great way for me to go about my day moving forward. So I guess the challenge for you is, can you think of an anchor? Is there an action? Is there something that you do that helps ground you and get you in the mindset that you want to be in? So whether it's pulling yourself out of a funk, you're in a bad mood, right? I'm going to throw my anchor and do that and try and change my mindset on this. Really challenge you to have a think about that. The other great anchors that have been, much easier for me to use and get in a state relate to clothing. And it's something that I've, as I said, done from the beginning of time. So even when we were in hospital in Sydney, one of my beautiful friends had given me for Christmas that year some little sparkly earrings. And she said when she gave them to me, I got you the sparkly ones because I think you always just bring a little bit of sparkle and sunshine to wherever you are. And I thought, oh, that is so nice. Like when you think that's how people see you in the world. Like I was really chuffed with that. And I'd taken these earrings with us when we went to Sydney. They were just little stud things. But I wore them most days in the hospital, and in particular on the days where I felt like I had zero sparkle inside me. But I'd put those earrings on and I'm like, no, you have the sparkle. You're wearing it. Be the sparkle. And it was a mindset shift for me to do that. The other thing we did actually in the hospital was we had these cups, Fred and I, because when you're in hospital for a month, you're drinking out of like a foam polystyrene cup when that was still allowed. And it feels gross. Like you don't enjoy your cup of tea in a polystyrene cup at all. And so I asked Mum, could she grab a couple of mugs from our house and bring them up because we were going to be there for a while. And I asked her to pick the Mr. Happy cup that I knew Fred had and the Wonder Woman cup that I'd been given, again, teacher gift kind of thing. And they became such a powerful mindset tool for Fred and I. So particularly after we'd got rough news from doctors, we'd sit and take notes on everything that had happened. And then we'd say, righto, let's go make a coffee. And we'd fill these, cups, and we would embody the person on the cup. You're going to be Mr. Happy today because we've got to get through this day, even though what we've just been told is horrible. And I'm going to be Wonder Woman, and I'm going to show strength that no one thought was possible because I'm here for my kid. And every time you took a sip from that cup, it was like renewing you with who you needed to be on that day. And I don't know, maybe for some people that's really weird, but for us it worked. It was just a no-brainer that we would do that and try and, again, draw on the positive wherever we could to try and fill our our cup, not just with coffee, but also with the strength and the courage to persevere in those tough times. So going into Paddy's second lot of treatment now, and knowing I had already some of these skills and tools, and having learned more through doing my life coaching to understand the real power that these things had, I went into it consciously going, right, what anchors can I add into my life to get me going? And I love this brand of shoes called Rollies. They're an Australian company made in Melbourne, and they're just beautiful shoes to wear. They're super comfy, they're practical, but they're fun. Anyway, they had these golden shoes, and I'd noticed I was starting to like bowerbird things with gold. So my glasses had like a gold rim on it. And for me, that became this mindset focus of finding not just the silver linings, but the golden linings. There is something golden, a golden moment in every day, but you need to find it. And so I saw these golden shoes and I thought, oh, it's nearly my birthday. I can justify them as an anchor. So I bought myself the golden shoes, and every time I wore them, I would remind myself that you can't have a bad day because you're in your golden shoes. And that was the mindset that went with these shoes as an anchor. And the beauty of having golden shoes is when you're having a rough day and the chips are down, the first place you look is toward the ground, right? But no, hold on, I've got bloody golden shoes on. And so I'm actually okay today. Thank you very much. Nothing can hurt me because I'm in my golden shoes. And genuinely this, like, I still believe it today when I put them on. And often as always, you wear them on the days when you need them the most. So people think, wow, doesn't she look like vibrant today? When actually on the inside, that's not how you're feeling at all. But you're wearing the anchors in a way so that you can try and raise yourself up from that lower vibration to a high one where you feel like, yeah, I am embodying a woman who has the bravery and the courage and the sunshine coming out of her to wear some golden shoes. So that was a great hack and anchor for me. The other one I loved was wearing a power jacket. And that particularly when I started running wellbeing days at schools or running workshops, let's be real, I felt like a total imposter. Like I had a real passion for what I wanted to do, but it's something that you don't really get certified in, or you don't have the piece of paper that goes with that. You just have this passion and courage to want to share what you know with other people. And so I did feel a little bit like, oh, maybe I'm an imposter. So I'd put my power jacket on. And when I wore that jacket, it was like, no, you deserve to be here. You're in charge of this room right now. And so you're going to present yourself and you're going to act in a way that says, I have the authority to be here and I have the knowledge to be here. And so power jackets were really important for me. And this kind of links, I guess, to another thing I was able to do while Paddy was on this treatment, because life was just ticking along, right? So I thought, you know what? You haven't dreamed big in a while, Kristy. I used to always be the person that had grand plans, big dreams. And once Paddy finished his first round of treatment, I went a bit large and went traveling with mum, and I set some new goals and I got to do great, amazing, fun things. And I kind of slipped back into the normalcy of life. And I thought, oh, okay, well, what's a big crazy dream that you've got, And I remember driving to town thinking of it, right? Going, I don't even know. And then it popped into my head, wouldn't it be cool if you could ever do a TED talk? Like that would be the pinnacle of like, wow, you've endured a challenge, but you've got a story good enough from it that you can share it to help others. Like that would be like, whew, okay, pretty unrealistic, but let's put it on your list, like TED talk. That's my next big crazy dream. And I kind of left it at that. And then a few months later, a beautiful friend that I'd met again through some self-development courses lived a couple of hours away in a place called Griffith. And she shared on her Facebook page, TEDx is coming to Griffith. And I was like, what? Because we didn't normally have TEDx. In my mind was more Sydney, Melbourne, capital kind of places. But in a town just 2 hours away, they were going to be doing a TEDx and they were calling for local speakers. And I thought, oh, I've got to put my hat in the ring for this. Like I've got to at least try, because all they can do is say no, right? And if I don't get in, well, then the timing's not right, or, whatever. But I've got to try and follow this dream. So you had to write a submission to the committee, and then they would look at everyone who applied, and then from there decide who would get to pitch their idea. And then from the pitches, they would select the 8 speakers that would present at TEDx. So I wrote my little spiel and sent it off, and, who knows, we'll see what happens. And then not long after that, I got strep throat, which is horrific. I don't know if you've had it before, but it's hands down the worst illness I've had in my life, and a pain actually worse than childbirth. I'll put it out there. And I was unwell for about a week and it just kept getting worse. I'd been to the doctors and they're like, no, you're fine. You'll just got to write it out. Your body will fight it off. And then I got to the point where the glands around my neck were swollen so much that I no longer had a face and a neck. They just merged into one being, and I could hardly move. I couldn't lift my head. I couldn't get out of bed. I was really, really unwell. And I remember saying, Fred, I think I need to go to hospital. And he goes, I think you do as well. So we went back to the GP first to just say, like, here's what's going on. And ended up straight in hospital on a drip of IV antibiotics, and beautiful apology from the doctor to say, I got this one wrong. I'm sorry. You've gotten really quite sick with it. Let's fix this. So I felt like dying for a couple of days. And then on social media popped, we've emailed out everyone that's been selected to pitch for the TEDx. And so I checked my email and there's nothing there. And I kind of thought, oh, well, look, I'm so sick. It's not meant to be. I tried. And then a couple of days later, when I was feeling a bit better, I thought, oh, I didn't check my junk inbox. Maybe I should just check my spam. And sitting in this inbox was, congratulations, you've been selected to pitch for TEDx. And by this point, there was 3 or 4 days before the pitch. And I thought, you've got to be kidding. Like, I was still recovering. I ended up needing a second round of different antibiotics. I was still not really in a great place, but this was my dream. So I thought, I've got to try and put together a 2 to 3 minute pitch, learn it, all while having strep throat and not really able to talk much. So it came down to basically the day before the pitch, I felt well enough that I could stand and learn what I wanted to pitch. And my technique for learning speeches has not changed since high school. And that is to stand and look at myself in a mirror and talk to myself. And I don't enjoy doing it. I actually really hate it. But I feel like you've got to practice standing and talking to a group of people. So sitting in a chair and reading over notes is not going to help you cut it. You've got to practice being in that moment, putting yourself in that experience. So I spent half a day, was about all I could muster with my recovering strep throat, to learn a pitch. And then it was also going to be Audrey's birthday on the day of the pitch. So we were taking her and some friends to Wagga. So I got up that morning, drove across to Griffith, did 2 to 3 minute pitch in front of people, which was really intense and overwhelming. And they had like the red dot. So you had to stand on the red dot to do your pitch. But I'm like, and luckily this friend Jacinda was there as well on the day. So she took pictures of me, and I just thought, you know what? If I don't make it any further, I've got a picture of me on the red dot, and like, wow, what an achievement. Like, I've pitched to TEDx, and I was so proud of myself, especially given the circumstances leading up to it as well. And so I flew back, picked up Audrey, took her and the friends, had a magnificent birthday, got home, and then was like completely cooked from that day. It was a lot, but I knew I needed to show up for Audrey as well on her birthday and, still kind of pursue my own dreams though at the same time. So cue from there, a phone call back not long after saying, we really like your idea. We just need to tweak it a little bit, but if we're happy with what you've tweaked, you're in. And that was horrible because I was like, so I'm not quite in, but I'm nearly in, but I've got to fight for it. And again, I was like, well, it's just a test, right? How bad do you want this dream? And so I went back and made a few tweaks. I was really conscious I wasn't going to lose my integrity in this, and I wasn't going to tweak it to be a speech that suited the TEDx team. It needed to be my story still, told in my way. And so I tweaked it enough to tick their boxes, but also keep my integrity in what I wanted to deliver. And then after a long week or so, they end up saying, yep, you're in, you've made the 8. And I thought, holy crap, I've done it. And it was just an incredible feeling, like such a relief to know I was in and to think this stupidly large dream I'm actually about to fulfill and be a TEDx speaker, TED talker. And so from there, you have to then write your speech, which needs to be between like 10 to 15 minutes. And we were told there'll be no teleprompter. So the kind of goal we were set was you need to have memorized your entire TED talk. And the thing that's tricky with TED Talks as well is that they need to be fact checked. So you need to write out your speech, but then you can't really deviate too much from it because they need to run it through their fact checking to make sure the information you're putting out there is actually correct and accurate. And so it really ties you a lot to what you've written down. And for me, I was words matter, and I was really particular about what words I'd chosen and where and how I'd phrase certain expressions or sentences. And it was really important to me that I was able to master every word. And so then I set about, it actually like genuinely consumed me, where I set about learning this 12-minute speech verbatim. And so I'd set myself a goal each week, basically, of learning a paragraph and nail the first paragraph. All right, now let's nail the first and add the second. Then let's add the third. And so I talked to myself repeatedly. It became actually a mental illness, I would say. And I'm not saying that to make jest of mental illness. It genuinely, I would lay in bed and all that ran through my brain was this TEDx talk for like months on end. But I knew it was important. And it was, what was really lovely about it is it was the moment that I realized what I've been through has now gifted me something that's worth sharing with other people. And that if I can share how, down and out and trapped I felt by our experience with Paddy's diagnosis, and I can show people that I still found a way to recreate new narratives for myself and pull myself out of that, situation, even though nothing had changed. So from, when Paddy was diagnosed to when I was delivering this speech, he was still on treatment. He still had a brain tumor. He was still blind. The situation hadn't changed, but because I'd worked on myself and I'd changed my narrative and I'd, challenged myself, this experience felt so different. And what I was noticing around me is that so many people were living in these lives where they felt trapped. So whether it was trapped by a marriage that no longer served them, career that no longer inspired them, series of decisions that seemed easy at the time but now have led them to be in this really significant rut in life. And I just really wanted to show people that there is always the opportunity for change. You are never truly stuck in any situation if you're willing to do the work and make some small changes and be brave enough to step out of that comfort. Even though it's a trap, there's still comfort in that trap, and so we stay. And I really wanted to show people through my experience that there was more hope than they thought and more ability to change than they knew. And so that was really important. And we got to the time to do the TEDx, and it was incredible. I had colleagues from school that came to watch, beautiful friends that came. We had dress rehearsal night. So some people came dress rehearsal, some people came to the actual TEDx night. But something happened when I hit the stage. And so dress rehearsal, you walk out, there's lights, there's a theatre of 100 people in front of you, and you step onto that red dot and you think, let's go. And you start with your speech. What I'd underestimated is, and I started my speech straight into trauma. Like in 2017, my beautiful son Paddy was diagnosed with a pilocytic astrocytoma, a brain tumour growing within his optic nerve. He was only 8 months old. So that's the first line I've got to get out. And great for the audience. It drops them straight into the drama. Really steep curve to try and deliver that line in front of an audience of people that some some you don't know. And so I went to speak and thought, I'm going to cry. And it was so frustrating, actually, because I'd practiced this speech. I knew it verbatim. It was just words. But then when you stand in front of someone and you realize, actually, now I'm about to share the most vulnerable experience in my life with a room full of people, and the game changes significantly. And I had underestimated that. I'd also underestimated the fact that this was my first real ever speaking gig. And I was about to do it as a TEDx, which is the pinnacle of public speaking. In the introduction, the MCs called it the Olympics of public speaking. That's what TEDx is known for, TED Talks in particular. And here I was about to make my debut on what felt like the world stage of public speaking. And so I thought, you've done it again, Kristy, like another case of where I've aimed a little too high, got on the stage and just absolutely shat myself, to be quite honest. But I managed to get through the dress rehearsal. I finished it and I was like, oh, okay, well, at least you got the initial nerves and the tears and the awkwardness of that moment out on dress rehearsal night. So now you can go out and you can smash the actual talk the next day. And I had prepared to wear, of course, the biggest challenge with a TED Talk, what will one wear? And I stupidly Googled it, which made it worse because people are like, this will be your legacy. This will be recorded and on the internet for the rest of your life. And you think, shit, that ups the ante a lot. So I'd found an outfit that I was quite, happy enough with, pants and a top. And I was like, I need a power jacket because back on my anchors, I was all about the power jacket that gave you the authority. But I also felt actually in the dress rehearsal when I wore that I was just too layered up. Like it didn't feel right anymore actually to wear that jacket. And Jacinda said to me, what's your shirt like underneath? I feel like, you've got too many layers on. And I'm so like, well, it's funny because I was actually feeling the same kind of way. And the shirt I got had like a really nice detail on the sleeve and So I was like, do you know what? I think this is the one time that you've got to leave your anchor at home. Rookie error. Leave your anchor at home. Don't wear the power jacket. You're about to be really vulnerable. So be vulnerable as a whole. Don't try and mask what you're doing here with some kind of anchor or jacket. Just allow yourself to be really vulnerable in this moment and deliver your speech. And it was really hard, but I did it. So I came out on the night to do this TEDx, and in the audience in the front row were my beautiful family. So I had Paddy and Audrey in there, my husband and my mum. And behind them were some amazing colleagues from school that had also come to listen. And when you're doing a TED talk about your child and what you've been through, and your child is sitting in the front row, it becomes even more overwhelming. And in my head, I'm like, you've got to do it, Kristy. You've got to just push through. Don't look at Paddy. Don't look at Paddy. So I didn't. I made sure I focused somewhere else in the audience. But, you know, in the back of your mind, subconsciously, you know that your family's there and they're all listening and they've lived this with you. And it's, oh gosh, I feel kind of just thinking about the nerves and the anxiety around doing this. And so the other thing they added to it was, we're going to live stream it on Facebook. And that kind of changed everything for me, because I thought, yes, the TEDx will be recorded, but if there's an epic stuff up or failure, they said we can always edit that out, right? So there's safety in that. But now we're live streaming and people can see this as it's happening. So if it's going to be a train wreck, it's a live train wreck. I should say the other thing that happened was suddenly we had a teleprompter. And so that was an option now. But I'd learned this speech verbatim, and I was worried that if I had a teleprompter, and I had tweaked like a couple of lines as well. So I was like, I'd have to actually retweak those lines and then give it back to them before it gets put on the teleprompter. Otherwise I risk, you know, reading the whole thing and then saying the wrong line. And I thought, no, Kristy, back yourself. Like, you've learned this speech. You know this. It's your story. You know it. Like, back yourself. Trust that you can do this. So can you see how I've layered epic amounts of pressure on myself as I'm about to do this TEDx? And so I start to speak, and the second line of my speech just disappears, completely gone. And so I get one line in and then I freeze and I'm like, shit. My biggest fear is that I'd get here and my brain would blank on me, and it's happened. And now it's the actual TEDx. It's being live streamed to whoever wants to watch it. I have a live audience in front of me watching me choke. And you can imagine what my head was like. It was frantic up there. Like, it was a really intense moment. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. Take a breath. Apologize to the audience. Start again. Start again. Second line's still bloody missing. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, you're just going to have to let go of the fact that you can't remember the second line, and just run with what you can remember and just do the best that you can. So deep breath, reset, apologize to the audience, start again. And then off I went. And I didn't miss, you know, I don't think, a line from there. But I was so pent up in my head, and I was so frustrated because I just really wanted to enjoy this moment. And I wasn't. I was stuck in my own head about it. I still can't believe you've done this. I still can't believe you've stuffed up the line. You've ruined everything, you know. And I finished my speech, and you can see, sadly, they didn't edit this bit out, me going, oh my goodness, and like storming off stage, like, get me out of here. And it was a genuine, like, fight, flight. I've got to get out of here. I've fucked it, basically. I've completely ruined my one shot, my one opportunity. Like, it was horrible. And I couldn't even go back into the room where the other speakers were, because I was like, it's just too much. So I just went outside and got some fresh air. And I was the last speech before we had a musical interlude, and then it was intermission. And so I just went outside and got some fresh air until everyone came out, and I went back in to see my family, and they were all just crying. And I honestly in my head thought, they're crying because they know I've blown my chance. Like, I've ruined my TED talk. And my, you know, colleagues from school were crying. And I thought the same thing. They feel bad for me because I've ruined it. And it just felt horrible. And then we went out to the intermission, and something really cool happened where all of these people came and found me. And one lady in particular, the lady who was running the TEDx, said, oh, can you come with me? I've got a lady who wants to meet you. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I went over to meet her, and she was raising a child with a disability as well, whose name was also Paddy. How cool is that? And she just wanted to thank me for sharing my speech and my vulnerability and giving her hope that her child and her will also be okay. And And that kind of threw me back into the reality of why I was doing this TED talk, because it wasn't actually, my goal was never to do a perfect TEDx. That was not the goal. The goal was to share my story and hopefully in doing so connect with others and inspire them to change as well. And here was this lady wanting to meet me and thank me for doing exactly that. And I thought, wow, that's, goal achieved, job done, I'm okay. And then more people came out of their way to come and thank me. A lady who was studying to be a special education teacher who came and said, thank you so much. You've changed how I look at my job completely, and I'm going to do things differently because I've heard your speech. And I thought, and that's really where I got this thirst to want to share my story, because I got instant feedback that while it was hard and vulnerable and, really challenging for me to do it, it was of benefit to other people and it was of benefit to society. And I actually got so much joy and reward from hearing that from people. And so I thought, I think I need to find my voice now more often. And that night I went to bed and I still sadly beat myself up. Most of the night, actually, I was awake till stupid o'clock, just beating myself up for missing that second line, because I realized in the second line of my talk is where I actually say that Paddy became blind, which I feel like is a really significant part of the story. But, when you're talking about kids using Braille at school and all these other things in your speech, everyone's like, what's she talking about? Anyway, it is what it is. It's not perfect, but nothing in life is. And another great thing happened where I was debriefing it with my husband, Fred, and he's like, did you not see at the end of your speech, everyone stood, they gave you a standing ovation? And I was like, what? No, I didn't see that. I was out. I was like, get me out of here now. Don't look at the audience, just get out. And in doing that, I'd actually missed such beautiful moments. He said no one cheered at the end of the talks like they cheered for you. You had that whole room just captivated listening to what you had to say. And so I needed to actually work on reframing my TEDx experience from what it was in my head, which was a pretty brutal experience, to actually what I offered to the people in that room and how it was received by them. Because I think it's an important lesson, which is why I share this. So often we see ourselves through our own lens and it's a really distorted vision, and we need to sometimes step out of ourselves and look at ourselves through the eyes of others, because what I've mentioned it before, but what feels like vulnerability and really uncomfortable for us looks like courage and bravery and inspiration for others. And sometimes it's really important to actually step out and see ourselves through the eyes of other people instead, because we can definitely be our own critic on that, our own worst enemy there. So there hasn't actually been much about Paddy in this episode. Sorry, Paddy, if you're listening later in life. But life was just ticking along calmly and well on treatment. And again, that just shows how important medical science is, right? To have treatments where families can actually still dream big and still function while their child is on treatment. And that's what being on this trial, Drug 101, did for our family. We were able to just continue on life as usual and aim high, which was such a beautiful change from our story that we'd been through on chemotherapy all those years before. So takeaways from this episode, I really encourage you to go and find your anchor and use it. Use it regularly. Find something you can do daily that's going to shift your mindset into the space you want to be in, into something that's positive, that's light, that's energizing. Find that movement for you and do it regularly. And I'd be really interested if you want to send me a message and share what that is. I love, school pickup. I hate, how's the weather? What'd you do on the weekend? I don't care. Tell me what your anchor is. I'd be fascinated to hear how you're changing and growing as a person. What is your anchor? So genuinely let me know that. Anchors are a small little thing, but when you do them regularly or when you cluster them, you got your golden shoes on, you've just done your anchor at home and you're wearing your power jacket, look out world. That changes how you show up in a space and how you operate. So don't be afraid to jump on the anchor bandwagon. It will be changing your life in some way. Next takeaway is always bring awareness to the narratives you're telling yourself and the lens through which you look at yourself. I think we need to really challenge our stories that we have about ourselves and about other people in society regularly, and we need to change them. Because if we're not doing this, if we're not reflecting, if we're not learning, if we're not challenging what we believe, then we're not growing and evolving. And we live in a world that needs growth and evolution more than ever, because there's some pretty horrific narratives still getting around out there that we as society and as individuals as well really need to double down on and change and challenge. Final takeaway is dream big and chase it. I think, well, I know once I became a parent, I kind of was led to believe that it was more important to put your children first in everything that you do. And caring for your children is important. I get that. But it's also important to still honor that you're an individual human being that has needs and wants and dreams, and you should be willing and able to follow them and put them as a priority in your life as well. And I know that just by having Audrey and Paddy in that room, as challenging as it was to actually for me to deliver the speech with them there, that was a moment where they got to see me follow my passion and my dream and stand on a stage and share my most vulnerable moment with a room full of people and see the courage that that took. And I think you can't underestimate the benefit as a mother that gives to your children. You can tell them to chase their dreams, you can do that, but they get so much more out of seeing you actually do it. So stop playing small, stop prioritizing your children and thinking that that's a cover for not actually chasing your dreams, and go out and start thinking, what do I actually want out of my life? What would I like to achieve? And start taking those small steps to get there and to follow your goals, because, you cannot underestimate the benefit of role modeling courage, bravery, and pride in your own achievements for your kids. All right. Thank you, everyone. We're getting near the end. I'm gonna drop that on you. I think there's probably one more episode really left to wrap this all up. And I'm gonna do my best to make it a really good one for you all and finish this story in a nice way. So thanks so much for joining in, and I'll see you next week for our final ep. Bye. I hope this episode has given you something to reflect on or some tools that you can implement in your own life. If you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please share it with your family or friends. It would mean so much to me. Remember to stay positive, be grateful, and take each step of the journey with kindness and love in your heart. Until next time, bye.